Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dancing SOBR podcast, and thank you so much for lending us your eyes and ears for 1 hour a week for this podcast. We appreciate you so much. Don't forget to visit espacio1839.com to see if you want to shop for anything. They have a lot of cool stuff, including books, sweaters, and t-shirts, and all the good stuff that Espacio has. You could also come visit them in person at 1839 East 1st Street in Boyle Heights. Thank you so much to Espacio for letting us do our podcast in here. This is listener supported, so that means that we don't have any sponsors right now, financial sponsors. So if you can do something to help the podcast out, our Venmo is at DANCNG SOBR. That's at DANCNG SOBR, just like we spell the title of the podcast. Thank you so much for that. And with no further ado, this week's guest is none other than Fabian Debora. Hey everybody, welcome back to the DANCNG SOBR podcast. And this week we have a neighborhood legend, el señor Fabian Debora. What's up, my brother?
Good. How you been?
Oh, I'm good. Thank you, man.
Good to be here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. I'm sorry we had to drag you out of your
my daily task.
Your daily task and leave your staff hanging.
No worries, man.
But it's all good. I'm glad you were able to accommodate us, and we always appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
So, Fabian, you're a painter. You're also part of the organization at Homeboy Industries up in the management levels. And what we like to do here in this podcast is we like to start way in the back. So let's go way back to like your origin stories, like where you I think you were born in El Paso.
I was born in El Paso, El Chuco, Texas. El Chuco, yes. I was born in El Paso, Texas in 1975. And 5 years of my life, I was raised in Juaritos, Chihuahua, which is border town to El Paso, Texas. And so, those first 5 years of life, I think for me were everything, right? Especially being in Juarez, getting accustomed to the traditions and everything Mom and Pops provided then. And of course, we moved to El Paso, Texas. By that time I was a U.S. citizen, as per se. Yes, we grew up in El Paso, which was beautiful. I mean, I think I remember and recollect many memories, of my abuelita, grandmother, who used to always give me the consoling and the nurturing that every child needs, to sustain their innocence as long as we can. And of course, like every other immigrant family, my mother and father already had kept an eye in Los Angeles. They'd come here before I was even born, so they thought it would be a great idea. Vámonos a Los Angeles, more opportunity, bigger city. And that's when they made the transition in 1980.
Before coming to LA, you still have memories of that?
I still have memories of that.
Wow. I came to the U.S. when I was 4 years old, but I don't have any memories of Mexico.
Yeah, no, I still remember the vivid, here and there, in and out. But I do remember the and I'm assuming because they were so impactful that I do have images of my abuelitos, my abuelita, even the image of when we left, when my mother had to say goodbye to her mom, my abuelita, and we jumped in the big-ass station wagon, and I remember looking behind on the back seat like this and watching and my grandmother saying goodbye. And that's when I realized, whoa, okay, here we go, And we landed in Boyle Heights, of all places, and back in 1980, I was 10 at the time. And so we arrived in the housing projects here of Aliso Village, Pico Aliso, in 1980, 10 years old. And even that, in those times, it was very family-oriented, those housing projects. It had its dark spots, but it wasn't as crucial as it started to become later in the late 80s. But I remember, the family-oriented events that took place in these projects, A lot of the times people have these stories of these projects, but we lived in them, so we got both sides of the coin.
When my family came to the U.S., my mom had a lot of brothers, and 3 of her brothers ended up in Aliso. And so I'd visit a lot in Aliso. I have pictures of weddings in Aliso, in front of the buildings, the whole lineup of the bride and the groom and all the chambelanes or whatever you call them. I also have those childhood memories of running around with my cousins that live there. And it was little by little, gradually how it got a little bad and stuff.
I think it started initially, I think for me, when I started to feel the major shift amongst all the community members because, in this case, a lot of us grew up with each other. Yeah. And when you really put things into perspective, a lot of us went to school with each other, Hollenbach Junior High, Roosevelt High School. But I believe that, behind the crack cocaine epidemic, that's when a lot of things, I think, began to shift even more dramatically, especially when you are in the gang subculture. You have the community members and mothers that, they're there. They don't have much to worry about besides what's happening around them. But I think when you are peeking into the gang subculture, it's a whole different story. And I think that's when you start to feel the impact of violence and the things that were happening on a first-hand level,
And speaking of like the gang culture, even though I was somehow able to always like skirt it and stay outside of it, even though I had a lot of homies, that were in like deep gangs, but I still like, played around the outside of it without ever fully getting in. Yeah. The 80s and like the early 90s and those years, like the gang culture was so prevalent. It was like everywhere. You couldn't escape it, no matter where you went, no matter even in school, walking down the street,
Absolutely.
Parties, everything. It wasn't like it is now, where I think now it's very
low key.
It's low key. We still see the writing on the wall, is like what I like to say. Like the writing's on the wall. It's still deep. Yeah, it's really deep, but. It's not like what it was back then, and some people don't understand that, like how you couldn't walk down the street anymore.
No, it was even at times, depending on where you lived, they already assumed that you might be from that neighborhood, right? Where do you stay at? Liso Village. Oh, so you're from that? And it was like, no, homie, I ain't even none of that. But I think a lot of it, the understanding of gang subculture. I don't think that anybody, gangs didn't really want to take folks in and force you in. I think a lot of it had to stem from a lack or an absence of something. Yeah. And I think for me, growing up in these housing projects, I mean, shit, we were privileged, bro. We had the LA River right behind us. So as a little young artist, graffiti was the first introduction to the exposure to my creativity. And of course, as a young man, I would doodle and sketch and draw a lot. And a lot of the times I was embraced by the cartoons like Tom and Jerry, Popeye, and I remember just mimicking those images, right? Just trying to mimic them and duplicate them. That's when I realized that I had this gift. But again, in those times, you don't have the resources or the access in a sense. And so
or even the vision to know that you could do that as a career.
Absolutely. Yeah. We didn't have that guidance or that awareness. Yeah. And eventually the LA River hip hop breakdance was very prominent as well. And so fell into that. And then, of course, eventually, as you start to see the graffiti art form.
I gotta ask, were you in a breaking crew?
Yeah, I was hanging out with the floor masters out of Aliso Village. They had this little floor masters, a little pop lock in there with a few homies. And if you and in the understanding, when you think about the '80s, late '80s, you had a lot of African American brothers in those housing projects.
Definitely. Roosevelt High School and
there's a lot of African American brothers there who were also introducing us to the soul music and these oldies, and we were exchanging, which was a beautiful thing at the time. But again, as we start to see, the divide starts to happen. But, as a young man growing up, doing graffiti art, I remember I would also get punished behind that, it was vandalism. So I know that for me personally, man, I come from not only the upbringing of those traditions that embraced me from the housing projects, but also, the dysfunction that was created now in the household due to immigration, right? Both my parents were immigrants, and I remember my father himself, he couldn't find employment just like anybody else. He was a construction worker, but dead end after dead end after dead end. So my dad had to fend for his family, so he said, well, we're from Juarez. I might as well start transporting drugs from Juarez to El Paso to Los Angeles. So my father then became a drug dealer, and he was providing heroin in these housing projects, which only became conflictive with, for me, my spirit, my mother's, and also the love I had for him, man. He was everything to me, my jefito. But eventually he had to fend and provide for his family, but he made that choice. And I think that's when it all began to get a little gloomy, for me.
I want to go back a little bit. I want to go back to like what kind of a kid you were in like elementary. Like what did you do back then? Like how was like your your school, and you went to Utah, I'm sure?
No, I went to 2nd Street Elementary.
Okay.
And then eventually when I finished 2nd Street, they plugged me into Dolores Mission Catholic School, which is right across from Pecan Park. I lived 5 houses down from Dolores Mission Church. And so my mother thought, ooh, Catholic school. And so I went to the, and she didn't realize I was like the poorest Catholic school in Boyle Heights and Dolores Mission. So I went there, and I think for me, you know, I was just trying to sustain my innocence, as I said, as much as I can, you know. But again, you know, you're surrounded in this environment, and especially that being a drug dealer, things start to shift a little bit, you know, where there's a lot of disturbances in the household. And so for me as a kid, you know, when I would utilize the gift of art, it was not only because of the technique, but most importantly, art held me, homie. It held me in various ways. It gave me some sense of hope, you know. And so I brought that with me to school. And, you know, when I was at Dolores Mission, you know, school academics was like not of interest, you know what I mean? Where's your homework? I don't know, I don't care. And, you know.
I always said I was a good student at school, but once I got home, I didn't, this homework never clicked with me.
Absolutely, and I think for me it was that, but I couldn't understand it. I just think for me it was like, how do you make the best of what you got? Regardless of what's taking place at home, the things that people don't know you're dealing with, and not having to let them know, because that in itself can be an issue. If you start telling folks out there like, oh, my dad can't do that. So those are like belief systems that they embed in you. My father did. And so in school, I would cope by drawing, right? And so I remember in school, it would be like 2 + 2 = 4, 4 + 4 = a drawing, get your ass up and go to the principal's office, you're not to be drawing in class. That went on over and over since 3rd grade all the way into 8th grade. And all I wanted to do was draw, man, create. That's when I felt the most free, the most like connected and stuff. But again, you know, you have to follow suit. You have to go to school and do all these other things. But eventually in 8th grade, I remember, I think that's where my life flipped. Because in 8th grade, I was just about to give my mom a little glimpse of the dream, right? Mi hijo se va a graduar de Dolores Mission, va a ir a Salesian, y un día va a llegar a Vasco Tech. You know, and that was the ideal dream, but it was already fragmented by the decisions my father had made and what was taking place in the household.
So you were in middle school when he started doing that?
Yeah, I was in 8th grade. I was 5, 6 when he started doing that. And so I was already in the Lord's Mission. And that's the thing, you know, I think this what I'm sharing with you is what starts to give you a perspective of why a lot of young men and women start to make choices in joining these gangs, which you say, or these groups, right? You know, and it's behind that, the absence of hope, the absence of some sense of purpose going forward. You know, when the teachers will say, oh, but you can be a great artist. I'm like, shit, it ain't coming from the people that I love the most. It's not coming from me, so, And so you can't wrap your head around all that.
The homies do hype you up.
And the homies,
what's up, you're a big dog.
And it's a trip, right? There's unconditional love, and then there's conditional love, and we tend to fall for the conditional love, which is that homie reinforcing those negative, you know, accomplishments, you know, and you want more of that gratification. So eventually in 8th grade, you know, a teacher ripped my artwork, you know, just about to give my mom a glimpse of the dream. And that moment, I remember when that teacher ripped my artwork, bro, like he literally disrespected me. And also when he ripped it, it was almost as if everything that I was coping through and getting by with my art came to the surface. And I remember that when that dude did that, he reminded me of my dad and my father. But something told me, this fool ain't your father, fool. You don't get to do that. Besides, he's embarrassing you in front of all your little college students, right? So I get up and I grab a desk and I throw it at his ass. And I remember this fool had high blood pressure, dog. And it's funny.
Those chairs with the little...
Yeah, the little desk like this. And then
at him.
That fool had a jar of lifesavers on his desk. And he would chew on them to control sugar levels, right? And I remember when I threw the desk at him, boom, that fool's like, Fabian, bloop. He looked like a little fish out of water going through convulsion. I'm assuming his blood pressure went off the rocker, homie. And then I remember everybody's like, ooh, what are you going to do now? So I tell that fool, why don't you your lifesavers now, punk? It might save your life. The smartest that I become, homie. And so
it's like a movie line right there.
And right there, G, that's when the principal came, grabbed me by the shirt and walked me to the principal's office, and I got expelled that day. You know, that I was supposed to go. Now it was time for me to go tell Mom to cancel the party, you're no longer graduating. And that's when I realized, betrayed by my mother who cannot protect me from my father, betrayed by my father who cannot protect me from my community and what's taking place in that environment. Betrayed by my community who didn't step up in time of need. And now the school system, so all you have left now is to say, F the world. And that's when it all began. You become this angry, resentful, hardened young man, and now it's you against the world, and I don't care anymore. So the same hurt, the same pain, the same betrayal, I'm going to transmit. And I don't care who it is. And that's what gets embedded. And so then it becomes that much easier to fall into the vacuum that exists in these environments, in this case, gang culture. And now, all hands on deck. And then, and everything else goes out the window from that point.
So at that point, you just let go of your dreams? I mean,
you just kind of, now there's a path, now there's a code, and now there's a thing you must abide by, right?
Like all these other doors are shut now.
Yeah.
So you have to take this path.
And I took that path, and now it's about your name and what it is and how you're going to conduct yourself while in this journey. Never did I lose sight of my gift of art. I just thought that would be it. So I picked up tattooing, and I was tattooing all the homies, big letras everywhere. That in itself was also gratifying.
Were you still like a teenager at that time?
Yeah, I was not a teenager. I was about 12 years old, 13 when I joined the gang,
But when you were tatting?
I was tatting. 13, joined the gang, and already in the mix,
And that's when you got out of school too, at that age?
Yeah, it was. I gave up on all that. I went to Hollenbeck. Okay, so I got kicked out.
Back then it was also like anybody just leave school.
Trust me, man.
All the time.
I don't know how I ended up in 10th grade, bro, but I never did any schoolwork. And I guess I was getting older, so they're like,
Móvelo para arriba,
Pásalo. And I remember from Dolores Mission, got 8th grade, boom, they shot me to Hollenbeck Junior High. I went to Hollenbeck. I was still a tagger around that time. I was mobbing and tagging crews, but then tagging was tag banging.
When
it became a whole different, another, path in that, another world.
Another easy way to get into that.
Into the barrios. And so then from tagging, I got kicked out of Hollenbeck for tagging all over the school, and then they shot me to Griffith. Got kicked out of Griffith for tagging on a Dean's car, which was a police car. Got kicked out of there, went to Belvedere. Then I got jumped in Belvedere by the barrios that were up there. And so everywhere I went, getting kicked out, and just no place for me, bro. And so eventually, I don't know how I ended up in Roosevelt, because I wasn't doing much in these middle schools. Got to Roosevelt, I mobbed the whole school. I remember my little homies.
Were you riding Spade back then?
Yeah, I was Spade one since the gate. From the beginning, and I'm still consider that Spade, and kept that name with me throughout. And I remember my homeboys say, "Hey, fool, forget Roosevelt, dog." In beautiful words, and let's jam, fool. And they go, but before we leave, fool, let's mob this shit. I say, you're down, fool? They go, let's down. You get building R, and I get this building over here, and we're gonna run from the back all the way to front, hit the lockers, hit everything you can. So all right, G, we didn't have phones, so we can't text and be like, hey, you ready? We just all right, we're going in, fool. All right, but we're gonna end up in the other. So we went in, spray cans hitting the whole lockers, all across the lockers, the windows, all kind of. Homie, they got us, they chased us, the deans, and got us out of there. Then I got kicked out, and they wanted to put my mom, give her all these restitution fees because I vandalized the school, all that. Got kicked out. They shot me to Garfield, bro. I only lasted 5 hours in Garfield. Right when I walked out of the enrollment office, walked into the yard, and we thought it was like a pinta. You walked into the field, and then it's like, hey, homie, where you from, homie?
Right away.
Yeah, because everyone knew when you were the new guy. You just stood out like a sore thumb, and there's like, hey, homie, I don't.
Especially if you dressed.
You have that look, and then I'm from the village, bro. I grew up in Pico Aliso, and they threw up their neighborhood, and this is my barrio, and next thing you know, getting my ass kicked right there. And after that, I said, you know what, man? Forget school, I'm done. And it was 10th grade about. And luego de allí, they tried to send me to Boyle Heights continuation, right next to Roosevelt.
Yeah, right across La Puente now.
I'm done. And I just said, let me just go to the School of Hard Knocks, and that's when I ended up in the housing projects, doing my life every day, just doing what gangs do.
Yeah, that's crazy, bro. That's a lot of closed doors, you know, a lot of just people shutting the doors for you.
But the good thing is I did have that gift, and that's the gift of art, and that always held me no matter what aspect of life I was in. I never lost sight of that gift, you know, and that's the beauty, I think, and that in itself gave me some sense of hope regardless of the mist I was in. And, you know, eventually, you know, in and out of juvenile hall, just like every young man that we kind of know around these environments, East Lake.
That was another thing back then, too, because I went to jail like 7 times, but it was always for dumb shit.
Right.
We just would end up in jail a lot back in the days. I don't know what the fuck.
Even for truancy, if you miss, like if you ditch and your parents don't know, they lock your ass up, take you to juvenile hall. One write-up, 2 write-ups at juvenile hall, threaten you with probation school and all this other stuff. And that was crazy, dog. They were like, it was the system was all screwed up. They were banking on it at that time.
Yeah.
You know, we're in a very progressive time now, though, you know, compared to that to now.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Big time.
I want to ask, I know that now you are a counselor for
I did that for a while.
Yeah, but you're like help for drug use and recovery and all that. And if you could share with us a little bit about that path and how you ended up meeting Father Boyle.
Well, I met G when I was 10 years old.
Father G.
And then the day I got kicked out of the Lord's Mission, when I threw that desk at the teacher, you know, they walked their troubles to across the street, which was the Lord's Mission Church.
Yeah.
At that time, Homeboy was not even an idea. It wasn't even on the surface. It was just Father Greg on the beach cruiser, the priest who helps the homeboys. Yeah. You know, it was that idea. And when I went across the street, I remember when I walked in and Father Greg's like, "What happened, son?" He was 36 years old when I met him.
Wow.
You know, and this was back in 1988, you know, and around that time. And they go, "Well, this fool ripped my artwork, G, and no one's going to take that shit from me but me." And then he goes, "Ay, mijo, look, man, you're going to get expelled. You're going to have to go to public school," which I like to call the Lions then. That's before I went to Hollenbeck. And then he said, "Well, before you leave, son, I want you to do something for me." I go, "What's that, Father Greg?" "I want you to go home and draw me something." I was like, "What?" For the first time, I'm not being punished and penalized for what I love to do. I always said he saw me for me and my gift of art, and he returned that back to me. Now, of course, I had to go on my journey. I started to, you know, first you sell the crack cocaine, you know, and make your money. You're hustling. Next thing you know, you're smoking a little weed. And that just starts to get a little boring, so you probably dip it in some PCP. Now you're smoking a lovely. It starts to get a little boring too. So eventually you put a little crack on your marijuana. Next thing you know, you're smoking a P-Dog. And now you're like, damn, this is something else. Next thing you know, as time goes on, it progresses. So maybe the marijuana is now interrupting the crack cocaine. So then you smoke the crack directly.
Wow.
And then you want to follow it with a little PCP, maybe an LSD, or maybe a little line of Coke, you know, and so on and so forth, chugging those Mickey 40s. And so now next thing you know, you're in this revolving door of drug addiction. And then so that happened to me. And I started to lose sight of self behind the drug addiction. I started to chase that more, not knowing that I had addictive personalities.
How old were you when you felt deep?
I was experimenting at the age of 12, marijuana, alcohol, just like everyone starts. And then eventually, like when I hit 18, 17, a little heavier, and it started getting deeper and deeper. And then what happened soon after that, throughout my time and hurting people and in and out of incarceration, jail, juvenile halls, and everything and so on, you know, I remember one of my homies said, "Hey, have you tried this?" And I was like, "What's that, fool?" "It's meth." I go, "Look, fool, you're spending more money on that crack, homie. You smoke some of this, it lasts longer, and you got to be dropping money just like that. You buy yourself a nice little clavo, that should go on forever." So I said, "Let me see." So I tried it, homie. That was it. Once I fell in love with meth. And even I had children, even I had my beautiful wife and kids and my mom begging me, and dad passed away by that time. And even though I had kids, you know, there was no other love more than I had for methamphetamine. That's the selfishness of recovery, insanity, right? So I started hitting meth, and I started getting worse and worse. And, a lot of the folks from my community here in Boyle Heights, they knew me. And a lot of folks always said, damn, this fool got skills, Spade got talent, dog. Use it, homie, you get down, don't let it go. I kept hearing that over and over again, but I still could not believe that shit, and meth, let alone on top of that, and so I would draw, homie. I would draw a sketch, and, and I remember reaching out to a few folks, and even on meth, I remember I reached out to Cristina, which is Chaz Borjoquez.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, my homie Chaz, and I said, hey, Chaz, I don't know what it is, G, but it seems to me like nobody just wants to give me a little shot, homie. You guys got this Dia de los Muertos events happening in self-help graphics all this time. What's up, G?
Yeah,
like, what's up, homie? Like, why can't I get in? And I don't know what it was, if folks were talking about me, or maybe my art wasn't up to par, or maybe it was just Fabian's crazy. He's on drugs, whatever it was. But nah, Cristina said, okay, do a painting for Dia de los Muertos. Homie, to me, that was like, all right. So I said, watch me now. So I did a dope-ass painting that my brother still owns, Dario Di Socer. And I did a dope-ass painting, and I brought it to Cristina, and so excited about the fact that someone saw me, you know. And it was a hit. I went in there all smoked out the gang, all fucking met out, but I'm in the opening, and I was right there trying to be a little crucito on status, right there on standby. and people are like, it's a nice painting, and I did that. And they're like, really? So, here I am. Just not only that, but, you got to give it to a lot of folks, though. Like, if you really were to unpackage my whole story, man, there was a lot of players that did see me. Yeah. And besides Father Greg, homie, I got to give it to Wayne Hilly and David Boteo. Okay. They were the East Los Streetscapers. Yeah. They took me in at the age of 17, man. 17, when they were going to send me to Youth Authority for 3 years. Wayne Hilly opened the door to Palmero Studios, and I was 17, 18, and Wayne accepted me, and he brought me in all thugged out, little cholo. Wow. And I went, and I was with the very first young East Los Streetscaper, and I walked into his studio in Palmero, big-ass murals, and now I'm in it, and now I'm like, that's right, this is dope. And then I worked with Wayne. He taught me a lot of things, and then David Boteo. Next thing you know, here comes Willie Heron, then here comes Yolanda Gonzalez, and I'm being amongst the great pioneers of the Chicano movement. And to me, I was so young and still in the gang culture that I didn't know how to embrace it. Although I stood with Wayne for 3 years, and I had to go on my journey again. And I fell again to drug addiction and so on. But I was getting little glimmers of what it could look like, what it could be. Yeah. But I held on to those little glimmers, my boy. And then eventually, I get to what you're asking. So I tried to commit suicide 3 times, homie. Because not that I was afraid of life. I was afraid of myself, of what I can do to folks. Because when you're on meth and you're fighting your demons, and everything you experience as a young man comes back to haunt you, and everything you've done comes back to haunt you, you're fighting these voices, these demons, and these demons want you to hurt and do these things, not only to self, but to others. And eventually that shit was getting so fucking dark and spooky that I was afraid that I would hurt my wife and my children. That's how bad it got. Wow. And I would pray, homie, and I would reach to higher power, creator at the moment, but I didn't even have a relationship. I couldn't believe in that shit. There was no way. And eventually I tried to commit suicide 3 times. And the 3rd suicide attempt, I remember the voice that the only way that you can protect these children is if you kill yourself. Wow. And I remember believing in that because everything that I've encountered as a young man, the same feelings of hurt, pain, betrayal, and everything was now me doing it to my children. And I cannot live with that shit. So eventually I ran across the 5 South Freeway here in Boyle Heights, homie, and I ran through Hollenbeck Park, jumped into the pond, made my way to the 5 South Freeway, and I was hearing voices, and it was like, kill yourself. Kill yourself. Then it gets demonic. Kill yourself, you worthless piece of shit. Kill yourself. And it was so loud in my mind, in my head, that I shut my ears. I looked towards the sky, and I said, F you, God. And I ran across the freeway. And when I ran across that freeway, I was 1st lane, 2nd lane, 3rd lane. I see a truck coming at a distance, and it's not stopping. And I remember, homie, clenching my fist, twisting my body, and then I remember saying, "My kids!" Last cry for help. And there and then, I felt this spiritual awakening, something that can only come from something that much more greater than myself. And it is there that I realized that there is a God, there, and I do have a purpose. And the truck did not hit me. All I heard was, and I'm in shock. What the fuck? The truck did not hit me. And when I sit there, I look towards the sky and I saw these sun rays dancing beautifully. And that's when I received the feelings of peace, joy, happiness, and serenity. That's when I knew that those feelings can only come from something that much more greater. Well, that day I said to self, I think I've just died. And now I'm back. And maybe the truck took the old me and allowed me to live. From that point forward, I went and got the help.
Wow.
And I went to rehab. And I started to unpackage everything that I was running from. And that was the abuse, the neglect, the abandonment that was instilled by my father. And once I was able to forgive me, and then I understood my dad didn't try to hurt me. It was heroin. I didn't want to hurt my children. It was meth. Then I said, got it. Then I came back to look for Father Greg after many years. And he's like, where you been, son? And then I said, well, I finally did what you asked me to do, gee. And he looks at his watch and goes, damn, son, that took you some time. And I go, but I did it, Pops. And he goes, and I keep my promise. You start Monday. And that's when I walked through the doors of Homeboy Industries in 2007.
Bro, I mean, you really went through the mission. I mean, you really went through the...
You know, I always trip on
the nooks and crannies of the dark side and found your way out. Like, found your, like, little, tiny, finally fucking whatever spark of a light way out, and you fucking grabbed onto it.
I always trip out on that, Rafa.
That's crazy.
I always trip out because, you know, sometimes I sit there and I watch my children, and life is great today, you know, and my cousin and those who have helped me find my way, even if they were gang members, my cousins were involved, and he always helped me. And, you know, when I sit back today, Rafa, and I watch my children play, and I see them growing and shit, and I always say, man, it scares me because I say, you almost didn't live to see this. And then you say, what would they be doing without you right now?
Yeah.
You see, you think about all
guidance,
that. And so when I came back to Homeboy, bro, like I already knew that I was on a mission. And my dad always said I was his king. Mi rey, ¿qué quiere mi rey? Todo pa mi rey. So I said, well, I might as well reclaim my crown. So I came back to Homeboy, and I started to work my way up. I went back to school. That's when I became a state-certified drug counselor by the Board of California. Got my KDAC 2, which is one of the highest licensure. Sick. And then I started to develop and help develop the 6-month outpatient at Homeboy. I was the director of substance abuse services and programming for about a decade at Homeboy. But I've always had the art, and that's when I picked up my paintbrushes and I started to create. Then when I started to create, I bumped into another mentor of mine who I give shout-outs to, is Vincent Valdez from San Antonio, Texas. Yeah. He took me under
Bro,
his
you've been under some masters,
bro.
I mean, speaking of masters, like, damn, Vincent Valdez.
He's a great man, and he took me under his wing, and he gave me the ins and outs of what he knows, and it has helped propel my art to a whole nother level. And I remember this healing, this recovery, everything I've discovered has only amplified my voice in my works of art on a whole different level. And also as a responsibility, because it's not just about being that artist, but I think for me, because of all I've been through and how I terrify my community here, it's a must, and it's important that I also pay it forward. And I think after being at Homeboy for 10 years, knowing that if I had access then with the arts, then my life possibly could have went a different route. But then if that's to be true, then how can I then now provide that access? And so I left Homeboy after 10 years with the support of Sandra Quintana, a great woman mentor. She invested in me, believed in me, and held me for about 10 years and helped me build the academy that I have today.
That's LPAN? Or?
It used to be LPAN, and then eventually, after I left Homeboy, I had the academy, and they reached out, and they said, how do we bring you back? And I said, well, the only way I feel that I can come back to Homeboy is if you take what I've built and I become the founder and executive director of the Homeboy Art Academy. And I want A, B, C, and D, and if you all can provide that for me, because I've always believed that the academy belonged at Homeboy, but it's okay. It takes what it takes, and eventually, after a few meetings, signed a contract and I put some paperwork in place, and I said, okay, I'm back.
Wow.
And now I've been back at Homeboy for about 5 years. And
so now it's the Homeboy Art Academy.
It's called the Homeboy Art Academy, and I just want to make sure that every time I introduce the academy, I always say I'm the founder and executive director. Now, I'm not competing with Father Greg, but, I also believe G is the founder of Homeboy Industries. But,
of course.
After all my blood, sweat, and tears and hard work and people who believed in me, then it is a must that I also get recognized for what I built.
You have done so much to represent Homeboy Industries from the get. So, I've always known you and Homeboy Industries as a player.
And it's not competitive. It's both and, but I also want to make sure that if we're thinking about, if we are to be models and leaders within community, then credit needs to be given where credit is due. Yeah. And I also believe that if we're thinking about assets for our next generations to come, then it is a must that I speak that shit with confidence and hold it in that way, because it's all about inclusion now and equity, and also, the times we come from and the times we lived in. At least for me, I come to understand that it has to do with all that historical trauma. And I realized that gangs were not just something that grew up from last night. It's from this racism that exists within our communities for centuries and centuries. And then you start to get perspective. And now it's important that we bring that awareness to the young men and women that I work for today, that I provide arts for today. And so it's been a journey, man, and every day, I'm just grateful. I'm 18 years clean and sober now. Yeah.
That's great. Congratulations on that.
Yeah, it's important.
I've walked into your art academy and seen the amount of youth in there, and how engaged they are, and the kind of work they're putting out. And then you also have those standout people that, check this out, I've been working on this for a long time, and check this out. And you see that same just that same feeling of accomplishment, that feeling of like I belong, that feeling of I have something, in the young people. So
no, and I think that's all it is, right? It's just about giving a youth or a person that purpose, purposeful whatever it is, if it's arts, if it's work, if it's whatever it is, but some sense of hope with purpose. And I think when they create, they're also reshaping and redefining their life. Art is about creativity. And no matter what aspect of life you've been in or what choices you have made, you always have that sketchbook to refine it all over again. And that's how I compare art to the lives of those young men and women, and to the beauty and the mastery comes out, It's just like pinturas,
I want to ask you a little bit more now about your career as an artist. So as an artist, you have done like these magnificent internships with masters, and then you started to have like your own shows. And I also want to mention that I first saw a mural that you did when I was young. I don't know how old I was, but I'm a little older than you. Yeah. But you did a Virgen on Hamill and Gage, and I remember that it said Spade 1. I always remember that name.
It's an oldie, but
because I lived over there on that side, and I saw that, and I was like, I would see it every day because I was going to Belvedere, or I was going. Gage is a frequently.
I lived on Gage and Hamill for a while.
Used to be a bar right there.
The Mazatlan bar.
Did you live in those houses across the street?
Yeah, right across from Mazatlan bar.
Okay.
Next to the little bar that's here.
Yeah, the little tiny bar right
houses
there.
Down yeah. And my mom moved out of the projects. That during those times, that's when they tore down the projects. Yeah. So I was in camp when my mom made the big move. And it was funny because she goes, quebraron los projects y ya me voy a ir a una casita. La ¿dónde, ma? Ahí en la Gage y Hamill, la uno, se fue de Guatemala a Guatapeor. But he goes, yo no soy la que está en las pandillas, baboso, tú. No. So that's your pedo. I can go anywhere. I was like, damn. But and I grew up there for a minute, and the Mazatlan was right across the street. And, when my addiction, I was still trying to find ways to create and express myself. And if you look at the Virgin Mary, she wasn't the prettiest thing I did that time, but it just kept me sane, and it also gave me some kind of, again, purpose or hope. But I am thinking about going back there and beautifying her and really putting a beautiful one there, just to kind of the next chapter, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna go and refine that. I want to. It's been calling me to do that. So yeah. But yeah, man, I've been lucky. I've been blessed. Not lucky, been blessed that I was able to meet these like Vincent, and he propelled my artwork to a whole nother level. I've been able to have exhibits. I've been also creating murals. I just finished a large project on 69th and Main, which is that 4-story high mural, which is the subject matter is Felicia Montes.
Yeah.
And then Alicia Wise, 2 great poet women facing each other, vibrating off one another. That was, to me, the milestone in muralism for me as a 4-story high mural. And also corresponding to the community, because that corner of 69th and Main is known for a black and brown conflict area. So when they called on me, they said, Fabian, what is it that you can create that can bring a sense of peace for these new tenants in these apartments? So I thought it would be great to put 2 large-scale women, vibrating off one another. I called it en la quech, so es tú eres mi otro yo, black and brown, mother images. As gang members, regardless of black or brown, we always hold our mothers and our abuelitas and our nannies dear to our hearts. So that's a good way. And then there was a moment when I was painting, I was putting the black woman up, Alicia Wise, and a young lady comes to the 3rd floor, and then she goes, that's me. And so I looked down at her, and I go, that is you. And that's when I knew she gave me the seal of approval, that my intent was embraced by that community. That's just, to me, a milestone. And also, we just came out in the Getty Black Book, the Book of Friends, with all the graffiti artists of Los Angeles with some high names there. And I was able to put in a page, and now that book lives in the vault of the Getty Museum. And so I've been able to navigate through the art world in my own way as a self-taught artist. And I think to me, it's about my narrative and also my advocacy, because I do invite folks and I do hold folks to practice what they preach. And when you talk about equity, inclusion, and all this access, then I'm going to hold you to it. And, you say this, then let's see. And I think I was able now to take my narrative, take ownership of it, and package it in the way that it's going not only to benefit me, my family, but most importantly, my community home. And when you say we work with gang members, I'm going to ask you how, and then what. Because it's not just a
pretty poster.
And then what? Because you can help me now, and then what's next? It's not just touch and go.
Got it. So, what can you do to provide longevity in your service? It's not just like we're going to help this guy out by giving him a pamphlet.
And here you go at 6 sessions. No, but what's in the long term? And that's how we really disrupt, or at least provide long-term sustainability for these little homies, so that they don't revert or go back to what they know.
You've also been, I'm going to say, I think, as I follow you on Instagram and, things that I read and stuff, but I think you also do a lot of, speaking tours, right? You get, that's
I mean, I'm all over the place, man, and I think for me, it's it's my life. It gives me life, and I think I work in various schools. I do keynote speaking engagements. I travel the world to share my testimony, but also to help them understand the power of the arts. We do recognize that a lot of the times these teachings that I bring forth are already been in play. These are teachings that have been handed to me by my elders, indigenous traditional arts practices, cultural knowledge, cultural relevancies, all those things that are going to be relevant to the population that we serve. So not only do I serve as an artist, but also I help develop programming, and also most importantly, just really stay true to what it is, the needs of the community at hand. And I think to me that's also part of the revolution, or the growth, or the advocacy that we fight for.
The tools that we learn to move forward with,
and it's all behind the fact that all these maestros have done it for me. So it's important that I also do it for others, just like Wayne, Vincent, and many others that I come across.
I gotta ask, how do you, now that you have the position of that you have now at the Art Academy and all these other things that you're doing, how often do you paint now? Do you still have a lot of time to paint?
Absolutely. I think when you want it, you're gonna find the time, and you know, you only live. You make the time, and I think for me, you know, it's also having 7 children. Homie, ain't no joke, and they're not gonna sit and wait for daddy to like come up through that door. So you guys stay on your grind, and I think for me, all of it's inclusive. So like when I'm painting a mural that is a contract for me, the youth that I'm working with are also putting their hands on it, and they're learning from it. Yeah. When it's time to install, I'll pick 2 or 3 of those youth to come with me, so I'm teaching them public art. So it's like hand in hand. That's how I get away with a lot of that stuff. But also weekends and, you know, late night shifts, you know, to create my own work of art. I got a few things brewing that are gonna be sick, and I haven't revealed them yet, but I have this big thing gonna happen with my art. And just you'll see. I mean, I've been getting great feedback. I mean, USC is all over it. They're like, nice. Oh my God, this is great. I don't know, what do you think of this? I really don't think of it. It's just my lived experience, you know. But they're on it, and they already put their back on it, and they're going to do a whole book around this particular series that I'm working on right now. And they've been following me, and there are art historians that are going to help peel the layers of the Chicano art movement and comparisons to American art, whatever that means, you know. And so to me, that's not only a gift, but also important, you know, like, because we continue to live in this myth of what is American art versus Chicano art. And at the end of the day, you know, that's what keeps us at times away from these institutions. But the beautiful thing now, I think that those ain't the drivers anymore. Yeah. The institutions, the LACMAs, the MOCAs, and all that's not even on the radar anymore. I think for us, it's about what is it that you already have in front of you. Yeah. We have so much access now with digital medias, platforms, and you don't need all that. But either way, what I'm saying by all that is just to say that in the end of the day, this book is going to serve the newer generations that are coming up.
I love that, what you're saying there. I mean, I do appreciate LACMA. I do appreciate MOCA. I do go to them. I do love the work that they have. But it is also important to recognize our own community and our own artists. And I this is something that I've been like telling people lately is like, see our community just like you look at pop culture in a way, you know, like there's people in our community such as yourself that are doing magnificent things. It's like, you know, you're looking at heroes in movies, you're looking for heroes over there, but we're here, bro. Like, you know, you're here. There's artists, all these people that you've worked with are fucking heroes, you know. So it's like, I think it's important that we continue to do that with our own people and continue to build that our own little, you know. Yeah. And not to say like to shun any other thing, but we just need we need some light on this, and we need to also by working within ourselves, we can also create our own industry so that we have money within ourselves. We don't always have to be waiting for a savior, you know. We have if we can provide our own funding for our own projects. Man, it's amazing.
No, and I'm with you, bro. Like, again, I'm LACMA bought some of my personal drawings for their collection. You know, the Getty has my thing in the boat. I got nothing against them. I'm willing to, you know, roll with them, play with them, but I also believe it's up to those spaces to really widen the door a little, open it a little wider for, you know, what we already have built within our community. And how do we, you know, not only shine light on it, but I mean, most importantly, like, value that shit, bro. Like, this shit right here is, you know, that's all it is.
You know how much of you goes into it, right? There's so much of you that goes into it, and you embed that into the paint, into the fucking lines, into every little like eyelash that you paint. It's all in there, and you know what it's worth, and it's valuable.
And also the story behind it. That's where it's at. The narrative.
Yeah, what
these
you
images.
Right? It didn't come from nowhere.
Yeah, and so man. But I hear you. That's a whole nother. But I teach. I don't teach. I bring awareness of all that. You know, and I make sure that these young men and women understand that there are various pathways in the art world if that's what they're trying to pursue. But first, it starts with you. First, you suit yourself. I think as an artist, it's important that you first suit yourself and feel comfortable with what it is that you are doing for you.
Yeah.
And then everything else shall fall in place. And I was told that by the master great, Wayne Healy, who said, paint what you feel, paint what you see. But most importantly, it has to see you first. Ya lo demás will fall when it needs to. Así habla Wayne. And I kept that with me no matter where I went. So, no, because sometimes we get stuck and what's out there? You already lost the battle, G. What's in here, homie? That's where you got to begin. Now create.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I wonder how if you could somehow paint a picture of like being young and drawing and like in a little sketchbook to like working on a canvas now.
It's a ritual.
Are there some similarities? Are there some connections still?
I do believe, yes. I think, when I'm creating, I feel bad for all you homies, if I ignore you, but it's a bubble, G. And sometimes when I'm creating, it's more than just creating. It's a ritual. It's a prayer. It's a ceremony. And when I'm in my creativity space, I need to be in my creativity space. And what that means is I shut the world out, bro, and I'm on go to battle in a sense. And I respect and treat the canvas as if it were a diamond or whatever, right? But like I do get into that space, like, sabes que, I'm about to go into ceremony, homie, and I don't need no one to, because in the end of the day, it's a responsibility more than it is a work of art. And what that means to me is that when I'm creating in this bubble and I'm going to convey an image, then I know that image is going to be reflective not only of me, but more importantly, my community. So for that, you hold it sacred. And so that's how it looks. And ever since a kid, going under that coffee table to create my own worlds, to escape my reality, it gave me the space, the ceremony to hold me in spirit. So that is recreated when I'm about to bust a theme or what is the theme of the art or the body of work. It begins with the opening, and then I go into my journey, and then the signature is my closing. And that, if I do that, then I know that it will be well received. And it's going to be by my people, my community, and those audience that stand before it. Because it's a prayer.
That's beautiful. I'm wondering now, because, I mean, you have so many, like, beautiful ways of looking at things and beautiful ways of describing things. And a lot of times there's people that want to hear it in a voice from you, like a voice that we get, a voice that we understand, like a community voice, somebody from the neighborhood. And I wonder if have you worked on a book yet, or are you doing a book?
Actually, I had a book. It's called Cholot, and that book, Cholot, the Aztec god, dog in the underworld, but yet points you to the light. That sounds like it's aligned with me, after all I've been through, and also helping young men and women. So it is important that we did start a draft of that book. I have brought Gris Munoz to help me with that. She's from El Paso. I try to pay that forward, bring a woman on board. Because Fabian, to sit down and write a book, with all the stuff I do
it's
now,
homework.
Not saying that I won't, but I figured let's find someone that can help me with that. Well, she brought me up into a point, but now I take it from here, and now it's to.
Well, everybody works with a writer like that, so it's not nothing,
Yeah, and it's a good way to collaborate, and then each one has their strengths, right?
Yeah, of course.
And now I just go ahead and
it's
take
your story in the end, so.
Yeah, and that's how it was played out. Interview, listen to me speak. And she types it up with a little twist here, a little spice there, but really it is my voice. And I think it's important that I write this book. And that's in the making. I have a draft, and now it's for me to take it to the finish line.
Okay.
So now when? No sé, but it's there. I mean, it's there enough for me to know that I had to get that done.
The manuscript. Yeah, I mean, I would love to read the stories, and I would love to share that book with other people that might, those books like that come across at a certain time of your life. You might give 10 people that same book, but somebody's gonna land at the right time, because you don't always need that, but when you give it to the right person at the right time, it can change.
Oh, absolutely.
It can change them so much.
I mean, it's evident. I mean, Luis Rodriguez, it's funny how half the homies that are incarcerated already read his book.
Yeah.
That's like one of the first books they get because they can relate to it, and it gives them a window, right? A window to their
always
life.
Running.
Yeah, always running. And I remember even at a juvenile hall when I first got my hands on that book and I read it. To find out later, Luis and Rodriguez and I meet in Rome, 1994.
Wow.
I went to go represent Homeboy Industries, 1994, to go paint a mural. And it was an excursion of New York, LA, Chicago, Roma, Italy, Milan, all these Italianos.
Yeah.
I was a little youngster gang member over there. That's why I think I became an alcoholic in Italy, bro. I ain't gonna lie, because they had that shit all day, I just took a
wine everywhere.
Y pues ahí llegué, and I met Luis, and I remember saying, he goes, hey, wait, bro, you're from LA, you're with Homeboy, you know Father Greg? I'm like, yeah. Where you from? He goes, I'm from LA too, but I'm from Silmar area. I go, wow, it took us to come to Rome to meet each other. Ain't that crazy? And that's when I met Luis. So I did a mural of an angel and a dead homie on a tombstone. And then I put one of Luis Rodriguez's poems on the tombstone. And that's when I made a connection with Luis, and we have some intersections. He's from Juarez.
Similar lives.
Yeah, he's from Juarez, Chihuahua. I'm from Juaritos. My mom is, but I'm from El Paso. And he was a gang member, and he found his way through writing, and I also a gang member. I found my way through art. So there's an alignment there, and to this day, we're still friends, and he's helped me, and I've helped him. It's a trip how it works out. So, yes, the book can land in the right hands. I mean, and when needed.
I'm really lucky that with this podcast, I've been able to really sit for an hour with people and talk and get to know more of a lot of people that we see all the time, but we never really have a chance to talk. And now this is becoming a theme where by the time I get to this part of the podcast, I'm like, man, somebody has to write a movie about you,
Absolutely.
There has to be a movie one day because we need these movies. I just recently saw the Cheeto movie, and everybody thinks, oh, Cheeto movie, whatever it's about, But the Cheeto movie is a real story. And I mean, I'm not trying to hype up movies right now, but it just takes me to this. We need to see ourselves in these movies in ways that are motivating and in ways that, you might not start at the right place, but there's paths to get to the right place. I mean, I'm just thinking about movies now, and somebody's got to write your movie one day, bro.
Absolutely, man. I'm hoping that this book becomes that script, and I don't want. And if that book becomes a script, it's gonna be an animated movie, not a.
Oh, that's what you want.
And I can see an animated movie that is really going to speak to the young men and women. If my innocence was robbed behind domestic violence, drug addiction, and conflict in a dysfunctional family, then how can we challenge those animated movie industries to really, develop a movie that's really going to scratch or tap into that? Because a lot of these kids, when I watch movies, whether it's Disney, Activision, Pixar, or whatever, and I see those movies, and I was like, yeah, that looks cool, but let's be real, homie. They're mystical and magical. You can probably brainwash a little kid in the moment, but you see that, and then you see the surrounding. There's no contrast. So how do we really do an animated movie that is reflective of those young men and women of color, babies that are living in the projects or are living in South Central and having to deal with some of these things, but yet with hope and mystical and that magic. Let's break it down a little. So I hope that this book can become that animated script for a
brother, I hope so.
I would say. I think so. It's missing.
Everything is in there already.
It's missing. I mean, I don't see it. They got close to the other two, right? Encanto and Coco, but he's pressure it a little bit more. We're almost there.
Well, there's just so many stories in the world, so we just need somebody to make these as well. As I'm not saying don't make your movies, but make these as well.
Yeah, but they're good.
Bro, it's been really beautiful listening to you talk, and getting to know some really deep parts of your life. I appreciate you sharing so much personal information and
thank you, man.
Being vulnerable and being open with us. Is there anything else that you would like to say before we get to this final question?
No, just thank you too as well for inviting me, bro. I see you doing your thing, your part in our communities, and with your craft, your art, your photography, and it's cool. Yeah, it's a good thing.
You just run around, put in work. That's what I do.
Yes, it is. That's what we
put
do.
in this kind of work. On this podcast, at the end of each show, I ask everybody the same question. It's a vague question, so feel free to answer vaguely or, whatever you would like to answer. But we only ask that you try to answer in one sentence.
Okay.
So if a being from another world or somebody like came across your life and saw it all and realized everything that you do and just realizes how much work you put into everything, and then they stood in front of you and they just asked, Fabian Debora, how do you do it?
I do it through the spirit and the corazón of my people from the community of Boyle Heights.
Beautiful.
That's how I do it.
All right, brother. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time. We'll see you guys next week.